Yeah, I mean, he literally, I don't think he was 60 seconds out of one Zoom conference and into this one.
What I get paid the big bucks to do. You know, people do their job 8 hours a day. You know, I'm just like everybody else.
Do you ever end up getting like a dry throat or you know just getting hoarse from?
No, you just introduced the belief.
All right, let's take this live. Let's do it live here. Let's play the music.
The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, what day is it? Oh, it's Sunday. That's right. Yesterday was my birthday. So happy birthday to me, and it was great. I got to do two things that like I haven't done in 2.5 months. I got to go to the beach. Legally, I think we're not sure if exactly you were allowed to go yesterday or whether it starts on Tuesday, but we think it was okay yesterday. We went to the beach. Couldn't sunbathe, but you can go swim. You can be in the water. You can walk along the beach. You just can't actually lie on the beach. And then I got to go to a restaurant again. Restaurants are supposed to open partially on Tuesday, but the owners of the restaurant said we were going to have them come. We were going to have to come. I'm going to mute you guys because there's a background noise. I don't know where it's coming from. So I got to go to a restaurant where we were the only people in the restaurant. We had the chef and the owners of the restaurant there. They made a special meal just for my wife and I for my birthday. Four courses. It was amazing. So got to go to a restaurant. Got to go to the beach. Yeah, life is back. Life is back.
Prepare for you.
All right, so we are doing our monthly hangout with the supporters of the Yaron Brook Show. Thank you, Jennifer, Julian, Jonathan, John, Darius, and Jim. And we might be joined by some others. I'm not sure, but we will wait and see. So the way we do this is we go around and you guys get to ask me questions, and we'll do that for as long as we can. And then I am available to take some super chat questions if you have them. And I guess I gave away the secret that all these shows that I've done for the last, 2+ years, I do standing up. I am standing right now, and I'm always standing. So I gave away that secret during a talk I just gave on public speaking. So. All right, so why don't we have Jim get us started?
Well, first off, happy birthday again. Loved seeing that you got a chance to go out and swim. I'm kind of curious, what your chef friend prepare for you guys?
Oh, it was well, he basically asked us of all because we've been going to this restaurant for about 2 years. Pretty regularly, and he asked us what were our favorite dishes over the 2 years, and he made us those. So it was started out with a gazpacho, was really, really good, but a really tomato gazpacho. Because I remember last summer he did one with watermelon, blew my mind. It was so good. This one was a watermelon, was a little different, but it was really good. Then it was a regular dish that he has on the menu. One of the only things that he always has on the menu called raíces locales, which is basically local roots, but it's like a beet salad with yogurt and local roots, so like carrots and other things. And it's really, really good. And then it was a carrot tart, which is one of my wife's favorite dishes of all time. And then a short rib on mashed potato, and the short rib was just, now there was so much food we couldn't finish it. So we're actually going to eat basically the same meal tonight, because we've got enough leftovers for a second meal. So it's worked out really well.
Well, that sounds like a fantastic selection. I hope you don't mind if I ask a real question on
Sure.
top of that. All right. So recently, hate bringing up other people once again, but recently Peter Schiff on one of his shows made a what to me was a very startling suggestion. I want to get your feedback on it. He suggested that there's literally no way we could ever pay off the debt that we've accumulated, the U.S. government. Now, in all of American history, to the best of my knowledge, we've never defaulted on any debt. But his suggestion, and this is probably why we have such good faith and credit, as it were, his suggestion was we should just we should default on our debt. And I mean, at first I thought that sounds absurd, but on the other hand, it occurred to me that if we did, then maybe it would be a good thing to send a message that we're not creditworthy as a nation versus as people. And anyway, I want to hear your thoughts if you have some on this.
Well, I would say I think defaulting on the credit is a legitimate thing to do only in the context of us moving towards real freedom, shutting down the Federal Reserve, privatizing banking properly, all of that. So
he did obviously put it in that context.
Yeah, so I wouldn't do it just tomorrow, right? Because I don't think that would be appropriate. And given that we've got printing press, there's no reason to default. But I do think that in the movement towards freedom, I don't see why you wouldn't. I mean, real freedom, not Ronald Reagan style freedom. I mean, we're getting rid of the Federal Reserve. We're going to private banking. Banks will issue currency. Then at that point, I think the federal government needs to say, look, this is absurd. We can't pay this back. There is no way to pay it back. We're not going to cripple the lives of our children and grandchildren for X generations in order to pay it back. And we are defaulting from now on. Either the government doesn't take on debt, or the debt will be backed by gold, and here are the standards on which we will be able to pay it back. And look, people buy bonds. The idea that they are riskless, there shouldn't be such things in a market as riskless assets.
Yeah.
What's a riskless asset? Life. Nothing about life is riskless. There's no. So I think it's fine that government bonds started to be viewed as risky, and there's no reason why the United States should be different. There should be a risk premium associated with them, and that's not a bad thing. That's probably a good thing, because it means that the market that disciplines governments by changing interest rates, which the market has not done, hasn't done. In the 90s, you saw that a little bit with the bond market when the bond market thought that Clinton or Congress was doing something bad, interest rates actually went up. And there were stories in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere about the bond market disciplining government. Well, that's not a bad idea. But that's gone out the window with zero interest rates and the idea that there's no long-term risk and there's no inflation. Inflation's never coming back. There's zero inflation. You look at the 30-year bond, and if you assume investors are rational, and you look at the 30-year bond and 30-year interest rates, then the implied long-term inflation rate in the 30-year bond is basically somewhere around 1%, 1 to 2%. So we'll never have inflation more than 2%? Really? I mean, maybe that's right, but and I think I think the whole yield curve is distorted because of government, because of the Fed, because of the Fed buys this stuff and drives down interest rates. So yeah, I don't have a problem defaulting on debt if you're really bankrupt. And I think the United States, properly constituted, is bankrupt. Right? It shouldn't have the taxing power it has today.
Thank you. So much I could say on that, but that's an excellent answer. Thank you.
Darius.
Thanks, Yaron. So let's see, I wanted to talk about something I read in OPAR, which, by the way, I'm happy to say I finally finished yesterday.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, it only took me a year and a half, but it was steady. It was hard work for me.
It's the way to do it.
Yeah. So something that I read, I actually noted, it was about 79% through. The Kindle gives you percentages. He talks about a concept called, he makes a distinction between social market value and philosophic objective value.
It's obviously
And
objective value versus socially objective value.
what was the first one you called?
One is philosophically objective value, and the other one is socially objective value.
Yeah, I think he just calls it social market value, because
Okay.
it's not, it's different than the concept of objective value. So the
No,
social market value is,
I don't have Opa here, but Ayn
Well,
Rand uses, those are terms that Ayn Rand uses. So she uses them in, if you want to read up about it more, she uses them in What is Capitalism, the first essay in Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. She uses those two terms. But go ahead with the question. Yeah.
well, interesting. I read that first, and yet for some reason I didn't recognize it when I read Opar.
That is one of the most dense, hard, complicated essays ever written. And every time you read it, you'll discover new stuff that you didn't notice last time you read it. It happens to me every time.
Good to know you say that too. Thank you. So let's call it socially objective value. The point is, that's what most of us think of as the market value. It's where supply demand clears. It's the supply demand equilibrium price.
Yep.
Then he goes on to describe the philosophical objective value, which is this, where the price will tend to go over time, that essentially only a kind of a, how does he put it? To paraphrase, it's the value that only sort of the folks who have the firmest grasp, the best grasp of reality can ascertain. And I found this fascinating because as an investment advisor, it really seemed to kind of open up the door to the idea of active management versus the concept that markets are fairly efficient and don't, it's futile to try to beat them over time. And, this idea of philosophically objective value is essentially the idea that if you work hard enough, you think hard enough and study hard enough, you can kind of outsmart the market over time. And I thought that was interesting that they covered that. But it made me wonder, so who are these folks that have the best grasp on reality? How many of these experts would it take? You could have one hedge fund who thinks they've assembled the group with the best grasp of reality, and another hedge fund that says the same, and they come up with two different views on the price. And as we know, two people claiming to be Jesus, they can't both be right, and most likely neither is right.
Well, but of course, anything where you're predicting the future is probabilistic. So you can both be, you could have divergent and you could just be equally right ex ante, but wrong ex post. You could both be wrong. That is that you're making some assumptions about the future. But let me take the concepts, because you kind of described it right, but in a sense you didn't, right? Because I think there's something more going on here. So socially objective value, in the way Ayn Rand describes it, and I think I haven't read that section in Opa in a while, so I can't remember exactly what Leonard says, but I assume it's consistent. I'm sure it is. Socially objective is exactly what you said. It's the market value that people give to something. Now, some of that is reflected in price, but it's not only price, right? It's how they value something. So I'll give you an example. Where price does not reflect the full value that I put on something. What is the value of Atlas Shrugged to you? The book. Well, to me, it's like, it's life altering. So it's massive. The value, it's one of my top values. It's, it's hard to put a number on it. It's so valuable, right? But the book costs like $7. I don't know. So in this case, now the market is not reflecting the value I have for that book. And it's two different contexts. One is a market value, the value that buyers and sellers, supply and demand, kind of dictate. The other is the value to my life, which is not necessarily monetary, but if I had to monetize it, would be much higher than that, right? So I'm getting a deal when I buy the book for $8. And then there's the value that, let's say, a future Aristotle might put on Atlas Shrugged. You know, a future genius might put on it, who sees the impact Atlas Shrugged could have over centuries and change the world. And he might value it even more than I do. And that would be kind of the philosophically objective value, the real genius of the time, who sees every implication of what Atlas Shrugged can do and has done and will do to the world, right? To human beings. And his value might be even greater. So there are various contexts in which we use value, and I think that's important to understand. And then, so philosophically objective value is not where the price will go necessarily, because the price of Atlas Shrugged might stay $7. But in 100 years, people will value Atlas Shrugged much more than they do today, even though they're still paying only $7 for the book. The market price might not change, but what it means to people, the value they get out of it, the value they have for it will change. That's not what the market reflects. The market doesn't reflect how much it changed your life.
And I think I'm on board with all that, but Leonard does specifically say that market price will tend.
Yes. So I'm getting to, in the stock market, in something like the stock market, you could see the same thing at work. So, you know, some biotech comes to market, some biotech company comes to market, and people think, oh, this is good, and they value it at $10 a share because they think the company's worth X billions or whatever, right? And let's say there's some genius scientist somewhere, and he sees this company has really, what they've really done is they have presented a completely new paradigm to how to do drug testing or how to do drug development. And they're not worth $10 a share. They're really worth $100 a share. And he sees that. And to the extent that he is a trader, to the extent that he's in the market, he'll buy it. And you could argue that he'll keep buying it until it reaches $100 a share, right? Because there's always money to be made until it reaches that point. So in a sense, his buying makes the market efficient, makes the market more efficient, gets the price closer to reflect his superior evaluation of the company, right? And over time, one would expect that other people will figure out what he knew. Because as you said, there are constantly people, hedge funds, looking at the company, and there's information and people writing articles. Maybe even this genius will write a piece saying, hey, look at how this really changes everything. It's not a normal company. This is a unicorn, they call them, right, in tech, right? And other people start buying, other people start realizing, and slowly that price it approaches the $100, and then all the relevant information is priced. And we would say it's efficiently priced at this point. Now, I actually think that's how market work. That is, I think markets are, to the extent that they are efficient because there are people like that pricing them. You know, there's the famous story about the Chicago's
$100 bill on the ground.
What's that?
He drops the $100
on the ground. The student tells his professor, the PhD student tells his professor, they're walking along, he says, there's a $50 bill on the ground. And the professor says, no, there isn't. If there was, somebody would have picked it up already, right? Efficient markets wouldn't allow the $50 to be there, right? And the point of proper understanding efficient markets is that they become efficient because somebody is picking them up. Now, in the marketplace, to be genius about everything is, in my view, impossible. So you can't beat the market in a sense that on every single stock, you're going to do better, right? I certainly think you can beat the market in a subset, right? If you really know, if you know more about a field than anybody else in the marketplace, then by you have You have that upper hand, and you can make money by making the market reflect the additional information that you possess, the additional knowledge that you possess. So I don't think that genius hedge funds out there that, although, you know, take Renaissance, the hedge fund Renaissance. I mean, they are beating the market by every measure on a risk return basis, pretty much every year for the last 20 something years. Now, one approach to this could be they're just lucky. I don't buy it. I think they have an ability to analyze things. They see stuff and they help make the market more efficient, and they make money doing it. And what their returns, and their returns have been astounding, what their returns are, return on, they're getting compensated for making the market efficient by trading away things that we can't see. Now, there are very few active managers that can do that consistently. As you know, most active managers, the past performance usually represents negative future performance. That is, the best funds, mutual funds in previous years are the worst mutual funds in future years. That is not true in private equity. Private equity, it's not true in the hedge fund business. In the hedge fund business, past performance is a good indicator of future performance. That is, in the hedge fund business, people have an edge. And what I tell people is, markets are, I mean, efficient is a pretty big standard. Markets are so efficient. Pretty much 99.9%, maybe more nines after that, of people can't beat them. But there's a Warren Buffett, there's a Renaissance, there are a few others who can. I'm not one of those. I mean, in my sector, maybe I am, because I've done pretty well, except in March, you know, for long periods of time. And even in March, I beat the benchmark by a long shot. So I've beaten the benchmark every year for 25 years. I mean, what do you make of that, right? In my little areas of expertise, I don't have any claim outside of that area of expertise. And I think a lot of people who are experts in those areas of expertise do beat the market, and by doing so, make the market more efficient. I have no question that I make the market more efficient because I reprice things, because I trade, you know, my trading does that. Does that make sense?
It does. Thanks.
Sure. Sorry, John.
Yaron, what do you think is the likely outcome for the brave individuals fighting against the Chinese moving into Hong Kong?
It's so depressing. It's so depressing. Because I know some of them. There's a think tank in Hong Kong called Lion Rock Institute, who are free market guys who are, you know, stand up to this. I've spoken to some of the students who are part of the student movement. So, you know, I don't claim I know them, but I know people that, and I know Hong Kong, and I know how an amazing place it is, and what a beautiful place it is, and what an exciting place it was. I use it as an example in all my lectures because it's such a, and I just don't see a positive outcome at this point. I mean, if China passes this law, which it probably will later this week, which basically applies its national security standards to Hong Kong, security standards that involve basically treason and undermining the regime, and basically it eliminates free speech, then Hong Kong is finished. And I think by doing that, it'll give the Chinese the excuse to send the troops in. Now, there are a variety of reasons why I think they've hesitated to send the troops in so far, and then they might continue to hesitate. I just don't know. One is, you know, you've been to Hong Kong, right, John?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's full of these little narrow alleyways. What are they going to hunt these kids down in the alleyways? What are they really going to do that? Everything is going to be broadcast live, even in China, because people have VPNs and people will be able to get this. They're terrified of bringing about sympathy in China for what's going on in Hong Kong, and they have a revolt on their hands. On the other hand, what option, from their perspective, what option do they have? Right? Yeah. And on top of that, nobody in the world will do anything. what is the United States going to do? You know, so the Trump administration right now is threatening to take away the special status of Hong Kong for trade. Who does that hurt? Hong Kong and America, China. You know, what are we going to do? We're not going to go to war over Hong Kong. We're going to flex our muscles. We'll raise tariffs. We'll, you know, just like we did after Tiananmen Square, we'll bring our ambassador home for a week. We'll even if we do that, right? We'll see. And then everything will go back to normal. And it's so, I mean, Hong Kong was the one great bastion of freedom in the world. And it was the one example of look how capitalism is successful. And I remember when it was turned over to China, I was trying to be optimistic. And I remember saying to everybody, my hope is that Hong Kong takes over China, not China take over Hong Kong. And for years, I thought that was happening. Until about 5-6 years ago, I thought Hong Kong was taking over China. And it's so depressing to see that I was wrong. And indeed, the opposite is happening. And now it looks like it's actually going to happen. So, yeah. I don't see how do you get out of it. The only thing is if the Chinese are really so afraid of going in there and seeing the bloodshed on internet screens that they don't pass the law this week. Because once they pass the law, they're going to be boxed themselves into a corner. They're going to have to act. Maybe they don't pass the law. Maybe they do something weaker just to give them themselves more options. It's hard to tell. I hoped that post-corona, the Communist Political Party would actually try to reduce Xi's power because he's been such a negative influence, and they blew this so badly that I thought they would do that. But he has spun it, and particularly given how we have done so badly with coronavirus, that he has spun it by saying, look at Europe and America. They did much worse than we did. So we actually are the best. So
emergencies seem to be opportunities for totalitarians to consolidate power instead of pushing
but
it.
this was a case where early on, it really looked like there was real opposition internally. There were a lot of dissidents online. There was a lot of understanding within China that they really did blow it. The doctor who died when he was the one who, there was a lot of that going around, and I hoped that would stick. But it sadly didn't, and it looks like he is consolidating power over it, not the other way around. But of course, you never know, because exactly what happens in these Communist Party meetings, nobody knows. So we will see what actually comes out of these meetings later this week. But yeah, very, very, very sad and tragic. And unfortunately, the West, and I include the United States, has no moral backbone, has no clue what to do, has no clue how to deal with China. We deal with China on this, for months and months and months. Trump wanted to talk about trade instead about Hong Kong. And if he talked about Hong Kong, maybe things would be different. But he basically said nothing about Hong Kong. Now it's going to be too late. It's going to be too late. All right, Jonathan.
Hi, Yaron. Just very quickly, do you think we're going to have your super chat is already piling up, and I just wonder, do you think we'll have another go around because it's already half past? And
yeah, one more go around. Yeah.
All right, good.
I've only got one real super chat question. The others are just contributors.
All right, good. Well, I wanted to just briefly say there's been a little criticism of you and ARI recently.
Oh my God!
I actually want to congratulate you because it just proves once again that I think you have made it, and it's jealousy, I think, from much less successful and more and very irrational people. But I just want to thank you because you have touched hundreds of thousands. It's impossible to count a number of people, including myself. So don't be discouraged. Haters gotta hate. And you're just an inspiration to many of us, including myself, and we thank you. So
thank you, Jonathan.
But here's my real question, or one of my real questions. The other day, somebody asked you about selfishness, and their question, I think it was a super chat, was, and you've heard this before, what's to keep me from just doing what? going off with a hot 25-year-old at a bar.
Yeah.
And Ben Shapiro asked you the same thing. Exactly the same thing.
Well, I think this person was cribbing off of Ben Shapiro, but yes, it's a common attitude.
Why is that the go-to trope for selfishness specifically, and not something like pick up a gambling problem, have a drug addiction, just steal? Why is that the go-to? And is that the go-to for women as well? When, why do women say, like, what's the key? What's their version of that? Is it also, why don't I go off with a hot guy at a bar and leave my family? And it always strikes us, why is that the go-to of selfishness specifically?
Maybe the people asking the question are looking for advice and tips.
I mean, there's something cultural about it. So I don't think it's quite the same for women. I think we have been, in many respects, since we're little, inundated with images of what it means to be successful and what it means to be happy. And to be successful means to have a beautiful house, a sports car, preferably a convertible, and a gorgeous woman by your side, a gorgeous young woman by your side. And if you think about James Bond, if you think about many of the images that are being projected to us of the essence of success, and of course the Playboy has always been deemed as the something every man wants to be, because we are driven by what? By testosterone, by sexual urges, and men are supposed to be driven by that much more than women. Although I'm not sure that's true, but that's the stereotype. That's what people think in terms of it. So we are not beings of free will. We're not beings driven by values. We're beings driven by urges. And that, hey, those urges are rewarding. I mean, I talked about this when I talked about movies. Think about all the movies that have a good guy and a bad guy. And the good guy is always, I think about the film noir, always like sad and has a pathetic social life and can't get the girl. And if he gets the girl, he's going to lose her because he's committed to his superpowers, and he has to go do those. Or like Spider-Man is never going to get the girl, right? Because the bad guy's always threatening the girl and he doesn't want to put her in danger. So he's never going to get the goal because he's committed to fighting bad guys. It's like you can't be good and happy. My favorite movie to illustrate that is a movie that Michael Mann made called Heat, which had Robert De Niro and Al Pacino in it. And Robert De Niro plays the bad guy and Al Pacino plays the good guy. Al Pacino's a cop. And the cop is divorced. And he doesn't get along with his kids, and he lives alone in a dark apartment and he drinks, and he has a pathetic life. And Robert De Niro, the bad guy, he has the 25-year-old babe next to him. He has a beautiful house. He has money. He has all this. So virtue and happiness don't go together. And where does that come from? Well, it comes from Kant, who says it explicitly. It comes from Christianity. It's deep in our culture. So happiness is associated with these material things. And you have to be a bit of a bad boy in order to gain them. Leave your family, right?
Jack says she believes that from an altruist perspective, the hot 25-year-old woman is considered the ultimate in selfish depravity.
Yes. So the other thing is that the altruists, not consciously, but the altruists have to position egoism as a caricature. Otherwise, why be an altruist, right? If the egoist is actually happier, if the egoist actually lives a better life, if the egoist actually has better values, if the egoist is a better family person, if the egoist is a better, lover, if the egoist is happy, and everything, but just a valuer, even on some of the values that the altruist holds dear, like family, for example, then why be an altruist? So they have to caricature the egoist. They have to make it about superficial stuff, right? And they accept that superficial stuff won't make him happy. So it's interesting. If you ask Ben Shapiro, and I can't remember if I did during the show, Do you think the guy who abandons his family and runs off with the 25-year-old is going to be happier than the guy who stays with his family? I bet you anything that he says no. So they know deep down it doesn't lead to happiness, but they can't hold, right? It's
Selfish
somebody,
irrationality.
they can't hold rationality. They can't hold that somebody can be a thinker, a long-term rational thinker, and pursue his own self-interest over the long run. You know what Ben Shapiro is saying is, in order to prevent me from going after every 25-year-old at the bar, I need God sitting right above my head, pointing his finger at me and saying, don't do it. That is very revealing. That's very revealing. So
Thank you. It just reminded me of how many times, you've answered similar questions, and keep doing it. And thank you again.
Thanks. No, I mean, that image of God standing above you and pointing at you and saying, don't do it, or I'm going to come after you, is what convinced me to be an atheist at age 6 or 7. It's literally that memory of thinking God is there, and if I do this, he's going to strike me down, and thinking to myself, that's just stupid. And that was it. That was religion for me, and I was done. And it was while I was going to a very religious school, a Jewish religious day school, and wore yarmulke every day and all of this stuff. So it's while they were trying to indoctrinate me, they were presenting me with that image that I rejected it. But that's what they have. And it's the only thing, they truly believe. They don't want to believe that we can actually have a rational reason why we don't want to go with the 25-year-old and with the 25-year-old by the bar.
I think the people who ask that think that this is an easy gotcha and that we're going to say, yep, you got me.
I don't know what they think, because it's so silly. It's so silly. All right, Jennifer.
Do you think there's actually such a concept as bragging? I mean, what would be the difference between that and simply expressing pride in something?
Yeah, I think there is such a thing as bragging. I think in several contexts. I think one is people brag about things that they're not that good at, right? So people say they're good at things that they're not really good at, which they often brag about stuff that. But then there's also kind of when you just do it too much, it's like, I'm really good at basketball. I'm really good at basketball. And I beat you in basketball so badly. And right now, let's go. And they don't stop. And it's like, they've got a self-esteem problem, and they have to keep repeating this in order to gain some kind of status in their own mind.
Those are the things I use to define arrogance too, as opposed to what most people use.
Yeah, I think arrogance is a little bit more difficult, but certainly bragging is, I think, that's bragging. Whereas taking pride is something often you don't need to say much, right? Real heroes don't talk that much.
Or especially if you have no reason to believe something that you believe very strongly, and you wag your finger at someone and you don't know what you're talking about. To me, that's definitely arrogance.
Well, and partially it's not about other people. Pride is not about other people. It's about you. And having confidence and having some arrogance is good. But when arrogance becomes when it becomes bragging, then it becomes a problem. All right.
Can I quickly just jump in? Dr. Peikoff actually answered this exact question. Episode 214 from April 30th, 2012.
Okay.
What is the difference between an egoist and a braggart? And I'm looking to see if it's in the book that was recently published, but I remember it vaguely, and there's some gold in there.
No, I'm sure anything Leonard answered, there would be gold in. And that sounds like the kind of question that would be in the book, that would make it into the book. I think he kept all the kind of questions like that.
Well, and Rand opined a lot on pride versus I don't know, versus
Or
these more
false pride, or
false pride. Yeah.
False arrogance. Right. Julian disappeared on us. Okay, he was here a minute ago. He's gone. All right, let me take a super chat question. Freedom Fest is coming here to Las Vegas in July. If invited, would you participate in the future? Yes, I mean, I have participated in Freedom Fest. I've been to 3 Freedom Fests, I think. I've spoken. This is the thing about Freedom Fest, and you can, if you see Mark Skousen, you can tell him this. I've told him this. I will come to Freedom Fest when they invite me, because right now what they do is Freedom Fest is Mark calls me up and says, how much will you pay to come to Freedom Fest? And I'm like, people pay me to come. I'm not at a point in my life where I need to pay to show up at your event, Mark. So you can tell Mark that if he wants me to come, at the very least, he needs to cover my travel expenses, and then I'll come. But if I have
the same
to pay,
thing, by the way.
I won't do it. What's that?
I get the same thing, by the way. We'd love you to come.
Yeah. And great. It works for him. Other people come. It's not worth it for me to pay to go. Some people, I tried it for the Institute. The Institute paid a few times to have a booth there. I think the first year he actually invited me to come and paid my travel expenses, and then he shifted the model. Freedom Fest is, but the other thing I told Mark is, you want me to come, give me a real stage. That is, put me on the main stage, put me on one of the debates, have something real. He promised me actually one day, he promised me that he would have me debate the CEO of Whole Foods. What's his name? I forget the name.
John Mackey.
What's that?
John Mackey.
John Mackey. I said, if you have me debate John Mackey, I will definitely come. And Mackey wouldn't debate me. So then I said, okay, find somebody else prominent to have me debate. And Mark never pulled through. So I'm happy to go, but it has to be worth my time more than just, the audience is not really my audience. So you have to find other ways to make it worth my time. They tend to be older. They tend to be very libertarian. And they're not young and new the way I like them. I like virgins, right? Intellectual ones. Never heard of Iron Man.
Not 25-year-old ones?
Not 20. Well, no, they can be 25-year-old, but just in a different dimension. All right, Julian, your turn to ask a question. You're back with us. Oh, you're still muted. Let me unmute you. All right.
Hi, Yaron. Would you travel to Europe to give a talk at risk of being quarantined when you arrive?
No.
Or are you gonna wait?
I'm gonna wait. I won't go anywhere if there's a real risk of being forcibly quarantined or even voluntary. I don't want to get into that. I mean, the only place I would go is if I had to go to Israel, if there was some family emergency. I would go to Israel because I think I could get out of the quarantine, but only if there was a family emergency. I actually had something close last week, so I was checking flights to Israel, and it's almost impossible to get there right now because the flights are so limited. So
I can't wait to go to Europe, and yeah, I'm waiting because I don't want to risk it either.
I wouldn't go now. Open. And Europe's no fun if the museums are closed and the restaurants are closed, and what's the point of going to Europe if you can't do any of the fun things? Not only that, but even if let's say you could fly into France, you can't cross the French and Spanish border or the French and German border. So they've got.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Now. So yeah, so I would wait a year. Now
That's so sad, but yeah, I agree.
I'm hoping to go in September, but we'll see. I've got a conference in September in Europe, in London, so I'm hoping to go then. But I won't go if I'm going to be quarantined. I won't go if I can't travel. It's just not worth it in that case. Yeah. But if you're going to go as a tourist, go when the tourist attractions open, right? There's no point in going if you can't go to the Sistine Chapel or go see the Vatican or go to the Louvre Museum in Paris or whatever. So that's why you want to go to Europe, is to see those things that we don't have here.
Yeah, I want to go to Paris, so I'm going to check that out.
Then wait for the Louvre and the Musée d'Orsay to open. Because
that's a great idea.
You don't want to miss those. All right, let's cycle back. Jim.
Sorry. Man, I've got a bunch of questions, but I'm going to toss an observation and a softball question out. Just something from my own personal observation. I've got a good close friend who has been trying for months here in Wisconsin to get through the lines to get her unemployment insurance benefits and such. Meanwhile, by complete contrast, I look at the food banks all around the country that have gone from a small, steady state of customers, of people consuming stuff, to vastly expanding. And I keep thinking, my God, what could be a more visceral illustration of the difference between the elasticity of government agencies versus the elasticity of the private market? So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, everything we've seen around this crisis has shown us how difficult it is for government to ramp up and to adjust to market signals. They're not good at it. They're a non-market institution that is not used to non-market signals. So we saw that with PPE, ventilators, masks, whatever. When the government has to do it, it's very, very difficult for them. And I think that's true of the equivalent of welfare, of a safety net. I think a market economy with a voluntary safety net is much more robust, because I think that people in a time of crisis who have money are willing to contribute to causes like this much more generously when they see that people are suffering. I also think that private institutions are much more likely to save and to invest and to accumulate and to prepare for disaster. And so they're much readier to adjust to market prices, market phenomena, whereas the government can't balance its books tomorrow. Never mind think about what it needs in 5 years, or what stocks to build up so that it'll be used in 5 years. They can't balance the books.
Yeah, to the point of not even being able to get through on a phone line, which it's not even a material thing. Versus seeing these miles and miles of cars lined up to get food, and everybody gets something.
Everybody gets something, and they've got the volunteers there, and they've got the infrastructure, and they built it all up, and it's working because because they're motivated, because they care, because people who work at these places do it out of love, not out of some bureaucratic need to control other people. So
huge
charity would respond to a crisis like this far better, more effectively than government would respond. And you're seeing that in food lines versus unemployment. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can't help but think that if FEMA were gone and we had only private charities, or primarily private charities, we would still have better, faster responses, even to crazy things like hurricanes and floods and whatnot.
Yep. Jennifer.
If you accomplish something and you put a huge amount of effort into it and you accomplish a heroic feat, and then someone else maybe has an easier time accomplishing the same feat, is the prior person more heroic in any kind of sense because it was harder to get there?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that that heroism is related to how hard something is. So yes. So the first person to climb Mount Everest is much more heroic than the 1000th person who climbed Mount Everest, to do something nobody else has ever done before, taking on the risks and the uncertainty that involves. So yes, there's definitely, if things are easy, then they're not heroic, right? The heroism is part of the heroism is the fact that they're hard, the fact that there's a struggle, the fact that you have to overcome something. So absolutely.
Thank you.
John?
So I have some friends who are really stuck on this concept of the deep state and the FBI's behavior around Michael Flynn, and what we're learning about that now is really fueling that. Any thoughts on how to evaluate that?
I mean, I'd say two things. One is most of what people call the deep state is just the bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy it's not that the bureaucracy doesn't have an agenda. It does. It wants the status quo. It likes the status quo. It doesn't like change. It doesn't like people coming in and changing things and firing a bunch of people or shifting things around. And there's a certain inertia around the status quo. And there's no question that the bureaucracy is going to put barriers in place to any agent of change, no matter where they come from. I think they would do the same to Bernie Sanders because they don't want socialism. So I think they just want. And the best illustration of this, and I've recommended this in the past.
Yes, Minister.
Yes, Minister. If you've ever seen
It's on
Yes.
Amazon Prime.
What's that?
It's on Amazon Prime.
It's on Amazon Prime. It's one of the best shows ever made. It's one of the funniest shows ever made, and one of the most insightful shows ever made because it shows the deep state. It shows these bureaucrats who don't really have an agenda other than they don't want things to change, and they want to be able to make decisions like they always have, and they want to be able to control the politicians, and they want to be able to do things the way they've always been done because that supports their comfort, their bureaucratic lifestyle. And they have a hierarchy within the bureaucracy, and some people are more important, some people less important, and they get together in their clubs in London and decide what the next move is going to be. But it's not some big conspiracy. It's little things. It's about fighting change. It's about keeping things comfortable in the way they are. And I think very much most of what's going on with the deep state, supposed deep state, is just inertia of the bureaucracy. And the show is so cleverly written. It's so smart. It's so to the point. I mean, I definitely highly recommend it. I remember Leonard Peacock recommended it in the early 80s, but I'd already seen it by the time he recommended it because I saw it in Israel on Israeli television because we got a lot of BBC stuff in those days. The second aspect of it is I do think, and it wouldn't surprise me at all, if some people early on with Trump, because of who he is and how he came, decided that they were going to both, you look at this at that anonymous op-ed and you look at certain people going and working in the Trump administration. So some people went into the Trump administration thinking, the guy's a nut. We can't trust him. He's crazy. So I need to be the adult in the room. So I'm going to go work for the administration in order to be the adult in the room. And I think some people did that, and we have evidence that some people did that, and they didn't last very long typically, I don't know if there's anybody there like that left, but there certainly were early on in the administration who said that that's why they went and that's why they did things. But I also think there was the flip side. I think there was certainly people, maybe in the FBI, maybe elsewhere, who from day one decided we're going to undercut this guy because he's crazy. Not because, again, they want to bring necessarily socialism to America, but because they want the status quo, and this guy was going to completely shatter the status quo. And they wanted to undercut him, and they wanted to challenge him. And by the way, I'm sure there were people like that in 1980 when Ronald Reagan, 1981 when Ronald Reagan went to the White House. I'm sure there were bureaucrats there who were so, wanted to undercut him and wanted to do stuff. So I think you've got to have a little bit of both or a lot of both. It's hard to tell. And it's so difficult to tell right now, in my view. I don't trust anybody. That's my problem, right? So were these people framed, or was it just incompetence? Or was it some framing and some incompetence? Was this a big, vast conspiracy, or were there just a few people who were doing this? And the upper echelons didn't know. All of these questions, I don't know who to trust. And to actually go and seek out the evidence myself, right, it's too much work, right? It would require massive amounts of work to read the transcripts, see who wrote emails to whom, what it exactly all adds up to. It seems futile to me. So I don't know exactly everything that happened there. It strikes me mostly as the left-wing media wanting to make a much bigger issue of certain issues, and the right-wing media and the Trump administration want to make much big issues of other things, and both exaggerating, and the truth is somewhere in the middle there. But I don't trust Trump or Fox. I don't trust New York Times and CNN. And it's very difficult when you don't trust the people with boots on the ground that actually are reading the emails and doing the research. It's very difficult to figure out what the truth is when you don't trust anybody. So it's hard. It's hard. And that's why I refuse to follow the Russian thing. I didn't think it was that important. I didn't think you care. I mean, Flynn, I met Flynn, and he struck me as, I mean, I liked him. He was smart, and he had certainly the right views on certain issues, particularly the Middle East and Iran. But he didn't strike me as very sophisticated or savvy in any way. So when the Flynn thing happened, I wasn't surprised. I mean, he was probably called up by some Russian, and they paid him a little bit of money to do some consulting, and he probably said yes. And then he said, oh shit, what have I done? So he lied to the vice president, he lied to somebody else, and they caught him on that. And the FBI said, yes, we got one of Trump's guys, and they exaggerated it. And Flynn was like embarrassed, so he pled guilty. But you know, so it's so all of the people involved are shady and murky, and I don't think Flynn did anything. I'm sure that Flynn didn't do anything bad consciously. I just think, and this is true of most of the people that Trump had around him, they were inexperienced. They didn't know what they didn't know. And part of what they didn't know was things like, in the transition, you don't talk to foreign whatever. Why not? Because if I were doing the transition, why wouldn't I know? If I know that I am going to be the national security advisor, why wouldn't I start my prep work? Well, that's illegal, it turns out. So I just think it was mostly inexperience. And the left turned that into something huge. And then, you know, the right is responding by making it into something more. So it's the sad state of America when this is what we're dealing with. Robbie has joined us, and he's so polite. He has his hand up.
Hello, Yaron. How are you doing? Happy birthday for yesterday.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, Robbie.
I had a few technical difficulties with my camera, so I just going to have to go with audio today. But I noticed you sort of opened up the Trump segue, which is usually your lead-in for me to come in and give you a bit of a hard time about Trump. Ayn Rand's novels, you know, some of the best drama in her novels isn't so much the good guy versus the bad guy, but it's the good guy versus the good guy who are kind of torn against one another. I noticed last couple of guests you've had, Alex Epstein very recently, Andy Bernstein, a very good friend of mine. It turns out that if we had to put Alex on the spot, and I hate to do that, but if we were asking him about who would he be voting for in this upcoming election, I would bet, my last dollar that it would never be a Democrat, given his views on energy and the Green New Deal and everything that's involved in that. And I know Andy Bernstein very well, and he's not a Trump fan, but certainly would take Trump all day over Biden. Biden, Hillary was one thing, right? Biden's a whole new kind of animal where this guy can barely even put sentences together. It's almost unbelievable to think that he would be able to last for 4 years, or that his vice president wouldn't be, at some point in charge of the game. Given just the energy issue itself, is that a reason for you to still rail against Donald Trump and advocate for his opponent?
So first, Robbie, I really suggest you hold on to that money tightly, because I love you too much to think that you would lose it. I'm not convinced about what Alex would say. I suspect he would disappoint you, but I particularly don't think that Alex would probably weasel out of the answer. I don't know, because he has some influence in the energy department right now, and he might not want to mitigate that by giving an opposite. But I don't know what Alex would say. I would put it at 50-50 that he might go with the Democrat. Andy, I think you're right. So my answer is no. I've said before that I will never vote for Trump. That is a reality, and I will never vote for Trump. And I cannot really think of anybody worse, and I've said that before. Not because of policy, and I've also said that, but because of who Trump is and what he represents and the attitude, what he's made the presidency of the United States into. I'm not excited about Biden. I'm not going to promote Biden. I'm not going to advocate for Biden. Biden's an awful, horrible human being, and the idea of Biden as president, or Hillary as president, or George Bush as any of these people is scary. Although the further we get away from somebody like Bill Clinton, the more I miss him. Or Gerald Ford, or even a Nixon, as creepy as Nixon was. It doesn't matter to me. To me, first of all, as I said, I think failure should have consequences. And I think Donald Trump's, on every account, his presidency has been a failure, and therefore I think he should lose. It doesn't mean I like his opponent. I don't. I detest his opponent. But I think that Trump needs to be out of there, because he has failed. And the coronavirus, this virus, has been such a failure for him on such a scale, where you're talking about human lives on a massive scale. And it's clearly a failure of his as executive, as the chief executive. I can't think of voting for somebody who's failed this badly. His foreign policy is a disaster. Everything about him, the economy, he's told us the economy would grow at 4% and never grew. It's grown at 2%, just the same as Obama. It's just, there has to be consequences. So if you can come in and fail and get reelected, then what's the point of elections? So, next election, I'll probably argue to kick out Biden. I'll probably argue for the Republican, because I'm sure Biden will fail for 4 years. So there's nobody who represents both competence and good ideas. Nobody. So the only way to vote is strategically, in a sense of penalizing people who've done really, really bad things, or voting for people who you consider abhorrent. You cannot vote for people I don't think you believe in. At least I can't. So, that now, as you know, or as you don't know, I didn't vote last time. You know that. And I'm not voting this time, not because I don't want to vote, not because I wouldn't vote, but because I'm not allowed to vote. So this election, I get a free pass because I'm not allowed to vote for president. But as I told you before, I would support, by holding my nose, closing my eyes, and everything else, I'd support anybody but Trump. Almost anybody.
Joe Jorgensen, who apparently today just won the nomination for the Libertarian Party.
I don't know anything about Joe Jorgensen, and I've said in the past, I mean, the Libertarian Party, I'd have to research the Libertarian Party again, but my past, it is such a despicable party as a political party that I couldn't vote for somebody representing them, even if they were relatively good. I was hoping, Justin Amash wouldn't run as a Libertarian, and he's not, to his credit, because I like Justin Amash on some things. I think he's terrible on other things. But of all the people out there, he was the one who I thought came closest to somebody I could vote for.
Just a quick little note. John Stossel held a presidential debate via Zoom the other day. You can find it on YouTube. Thought it was a little bit enlightening.
Okay. All right, let's see. Who's next? John.
Can you talk a little bit about the morality of individual bankruptcy law?
I mean, the whole issue of bankruptcy law is interesting, and I don't really have a good sense of it, because, I mean, you'd have to have a philosophy of law, a legal philosopher, to really think it through, right? So the issue with personal bankruptcy is you've taken on all these debts, and personal bankruptcy allows you not to pay some of them, right? To basically walk away from those debts. And now, the contrast of that is, let's say 100 years ago, 200 years ago, where you went to jail, right? Or you went into indentured servitude in order to pay off the debts. So I don't think that's appropriate, but I'm not sure you can just write them off either. There has to be some balance here. There has to be some proper methodology. Now, the advantage of the current personal bankruptcy laws is that everybody knows what they are. So when the credit card company issues me a credit card, they know that if I file for bankruptcy, I won't be paying them back. So they do a background check, they do a credit check, they do all that to try to make sure that I'm good for it, right? That I can't just walk away from it. So in a sense, I think this is the best I can think of, because it's upfront. Everybody knows it. The same with corporate law, right? Companies can write down their debt in bankruptcy, but it's complicated. It's not easy. And everybody knows that in advance, and it's priced into the price of bonds. And when they are written off, it's in a court of law, and the bondholders are represented, and there's a whole debate. And so I think that's the right way to do it. Is it exactly right? It's beyond my pay grade, I guess. We'd have to ask a legal expert, somebody who really thought about this from a legal philosophical perspective.
Maybe a good topic for Amy.
Yeah, maybe Amy or Steve Simpson or Larry Salzman. Larry Salzman. There are a number of people who this would be a good topic for. Jonathan?
Part of me wants to ask you something kind of more serious about how we should commemorate Memorial Day, but because this is my last go around, can I ask you 3 quick TV questions?
Sure.
First of all, quick thoughts on, I'll give you 3 quick ones. Quick thoughts on Fauda. You're such a gourmand. Do you also like cooking shows? And then I wanted to ask you, you said you preferred slapstick cartoons like Bugs Bunny to The Simpsons. And I was kind of shocked by that, because The Simpsons, which I am a fan of, is really a kind of study of human emotions and relationships between family members. Bugs Bunny is so stupid. It's just slapstick. Bugs gets his head blown off with a big cannon. So I was surprised that you defended that so strongly. Can you answer those 3? Please?
Head blown off with a cannon with amazing music going on in the background and stuff. So let me start. What was the first one? Fauda. I mean, I love Fauda. I think Fauda.
No, the new season.
Oh, the new season. I thought it was weaker than the previous 2 seasons. I don't think it was as good as the first 2 seasons. I think Fauda generally tries to walk a fine line of not taking a moral stand, not taking a strong enough moral stand on the Israel side. Season 2 had a little bit of it. There's a scene where they're sitting in Tel Aviv, and he's saying, "Isn't this better than where you come from?" But that's as close as it's got. It tries to walk this line of, you love these guys, and you kind of implicitly they're the good guys, but it doesn't really.
I also agree. I think this season was a little weaker, but I thought it was still enjoyable.
Oh, good. And the other thing was, what I think Fauda's really strong in, and this season was really powerful, is that the conflict and the way it's handled and the way it's dealt with punishes the good people, punishes the innocent. Think about and I'm not going to give the story away, but think about the kid at the beginning of Fauda, the boxer. He's just a kid who wants to box. And by the end of the show, I won't say, but he's not just a kid who wants to box. And it's not his fault in a sense. He's put in situations that ain't possible. No matter what he does, he loses. But it's the circumstances. And it's the same effect that, what's that movie? Shenandoah. The movie Shenandoah has. Shenandoah, where somebody is trying to stay neutral between the South and the North during the Civil War. And he can't do it. You're a good guy. You're an innocent. You're trying to save the lives of your kids. And your life gets completely blown away, completely destroyed. And if you remember the first 2 seasons, the woman he loves, the woman the main character loves, and what happens to her and how she gets involved and what happens to her in the end. Good, innocent people cannot survive the kind of conflict that exists between the Israelis and Palestinians, primarily because the way it is dealt with. The way it was dealt with. So it's so powerfully illustrating that point that it's just a magnificent show. The writing's great. The action is exciting. You get a real claustrophobic sense of what it's like in the Gaza Strip in this season and the West Bank in previous seasons. It's very, very powerful stuff. It's one of the best shows on television, one of the best shows made ever, I think, on television. It's really good. All right, Darius.
Thanks, Yaron. So I was hoping we could just chat a bit about Eastern thought and I've wanted to bring it up from time to time in the past, and it always seems sort of random and off topic.
Yep.
But then in your most recent podcast before today, you actually had some positive things to say about the concept of being present.
Yep.
So I thought, okay, I'll do it now. So, I've been a long time daily yoga practitioner myself, and I've often sort of wrestled with some of the apparent kind of contradictions between objectivism and Eastern thought. And one of them is the concept of ego. Ego in objectivism is a super positive concept, and ego in Eastern thought is generally a negative concept. And it's not, what I've realized is it's not because Eastern thought espouses altruism. The practice of yoga and meditation is actually, I would argue, is a super selfish, individualistic practice if you do it seriously. And no, what I've realized about the concept of ego in Eastern thought is what Eastern thought is referring to when they talk about ego as a negative thing is they're not referring to, so objectivism refers to your true self when they're talking about ego. In Eastern thought, they're referring to your false self. So there is a true self, but what they refer to as the false self is the ego. And for objectivism, that would be concepts like second-handedness, lack of integrity, the value of integrity. So I actually think that I'm not trying to say that you reach all the same conclusions with Eastern thought by any means, but they're not as starkly out of alignment as I think a lot of objectivists would realize.
Yeah. While you were talking, I remembered that I did not answer Jonathan's question. I answered one of three. So I'll get back to Jonathan and the other two in a second, but let me answer this first. So I think that first, I think Eastern thought doesn't really have the thing that I despise most about Christianity in a sense, which is altruism and embedded altruism. So that is a virtue in a sense in Eastern thought. And there's no question in my mind that there are things that one can learn from Eastern thought and one can benefit from it. And certainly there's certain practices. I don't do yoga, but I imagine yoga, meditation. I don't do meditation, but I see people who do, and I think they get a lot of benefit from it. So there's certainly things that you do, certain practices that are very good. And there's certain ideas that I'm sure are good. And there's certain ideas that I'm sure as an objectivist, you could interpret as good, even if they're not meant that way. I know that I could, there are people who tell me Judaism is consistent with objectivism. There are people who tell me Christianity is consistent with objectivism. And there's a sense in which you can take the concepts within those versions and reinterpret them based on objectivism to show that they're the same. At the end, it fails. And I think the same would happen with Eastern philosophy as a whole. That doesn't mean they're not concepts that are useful, that are helpful in your life. But I think the dominant thing about Eastern philosophy, Eastern mysticism, Buddhism, because not all Eastern philosophy is the same. The thing that dominates is the difference between is the negation of the material world as inferior and a passivity, the indoctrination of a passivity. It's a reason why India has never developed a thriving culture, industry, things, right? Because the material world's not important. It's not significant. Now, I know, again, there are other interpretations. So I'm all for taking the things that are good. If meditation helps you be present, if yoga helps you be present, helps appreciate your life, helps calm your mind, focus your mind, orient you on what's important, then great. Then I'm all for using those tools and using even some of the ideas if they're helpful. But as a philosophy, I'm skeptical, right? As a overarching set of ideas. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
So a couple of things on Jonathan. Cooking shows. Yeah, I mean, I love cooking shows. I love, I started out years and years and years ago, I don't know, with Iron Chef. I don't know if you guys, and if you remember the original Japanese Iron Chef before they Americanized it, where these guys were going crazy and it was like a blood sports, their cooking was like their whole existence depended on winning this or not. And it was like intense and passionate, but it was amazing. So I love that. I love the American version, even if they took off that Japanese intensity to it. And then I love the cooking competitions. And I've also gotten into some of these documentaries. What is it? Chef's Table or whatever, where they go to the best chefs in the world. And one of the challenges that we kind of have is how many of these restaurants can we actually go to and eat at? So that's one of the fun things that my wife and I do is we try to go to some of these top restaurants and eat at them, and that we see on these documentaries and stuff, which is a fun thing. So I like a lot of what's involved in those cooking shows. Not the cooking shows themselves, more the competition and the documentaries about the best cooks. I'm not interested in how to boil an egg or how to make a roast pie or something. I like the really crazy stuff that some of these chefs put together. Bugs Bunny versus The Simpsons. I don't really think I can defend myself here, which is you're not going to hear very often from me. I don't think I've given it enough thought. I think I'll just say this. There's nothing ideological about Bugs Bunny. It's not intellectual.
Well, they're full of social commentary.
There's some, but that's not what Bugs Bunny's about. No. Bugs Bunny is about a benevolent, fun, crazy sense of life that is just puts a smile in your face, and it's just, my favorite Bugs Bunnies are the ones where they put him doing all these crazy stuff to the sound of classical music, or where he's doing Wagner or whatever, and it's just a romp. It's just fun. And I love the colors. I love the cartoons, the drawing. It just has this benevolent, positive, fun sense of life to it. And I find The Simpsons, intelligent, intellectual, but the animation offends me. And it's dark. And of course it gets darker with Family Man and the subsequent ones. Simpsons is the best of those in a sense that it started the trend, so it's not as dark. They get darker and darker as it goes along. But there's a nihilism there, in a sense of going after all values, and it's just, if I want my intellectual stuff, I don't want it with little cartoonish idiots running around. When it's going to be a cartoon, other than Disney made some animated movies that are amazing, but I want it to just be fun. I just want it to be slapsticky, non-intellectual, just like what it is to play outside, right? What it is to play in the place in the sandbox, like that childish mentality, and why Bugs Bunny appeals to children. That's what I want from it. And I can't watch Bugs Bunny for very long. It's just short episodes because it's just boring after a while. But anyway, that's my
Thank you.
Bugs Bunny versus The Simpsons. Julian, and then Robbie, and then, God, it's an hour and a half, and I've got a bunch of Super Chat questions. I might have to delay the Super Chat questions to another show. But go ahead, Julian.
Okay. Would there be companies like TransUnion in a laissez-faire economy? Would credit be tied to a social security number and cleared through these agencies or whatever they are?
Yeah, I think there would be agencies. There'd probably be more, not less. There'd probably be all kinds of credit-like agencies that because there isn't a regulator, there isn't a central planner. The markets would create institutions that could provide information, but it would be voluntary to participate, right? If you didn't want to be tracked by the credit unions, you wouldn't have to be tracked by the credit unions, right? So, but you also couldn't get a credit card if you did that, right? So a condition for getting a credit card, or condition for opening a bank account, or condition for these certain things would be signing up for certain tracking tracking mechanisms. Yes, I think there'd be more agencies providing unique information about you, but they would only be able to accumulate that information voluntarily and based on your need for that kind of information for other people. So there would be a whole network of these things. Yeah. All right, Robbie. Robbie, you there? You want me to unmute you? Doesn't work. It's not working. You want me to?
I am. I'm sorry. I am. Can you hear me?
Yep. I can hear you.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I am. The feedback because you're in the back. I'm in the background as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Feedback because you're in the back. I'm in the background as well. Yep.
Get rid of the phone. Sorry. Sorry, technical difficulties, I told you. All right, and I just about finished typing in my question. Jonathan gets 3 questions in one: Looney Tunes and cooking shows, and all of those fantastically philosophical issues that I'm sure everybody's interested in. But I wanted to, I really had a follow-up, which was
sure.
Biden. How is his apparent dementia not a real issue, given as horrible as Trump, as you see Trump to be? But most importantly, the question I'd love to hear answered is instead of you debating all of these lame socialists that you just seem to walk all over, and it's just, you know, easy fruit, low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Why don't have a debate with the real objectivists who disagree with you about Trump?
You know, if Andy or somebody like that wants to debate, I don't know any real objectivists who disagree with me about Trump who would want to debate me. I mean, and who's the audience for that debate? So this is the real answer. Who's the audience for that debate? Who cares if objectivists disagree about Trump? See, my goal is not to convince objectivists to agree with me. I mean, I don't really, I mean, you do disagree with me about Trump, for example. So what? You know, good. But we agree on fundamental stuff. My goal is to convince people who are non-objectivists about objectivism. And me talking about Trump is one way to get to non-objectivism to come in. So most of what I do in life and most of what I want to do in life is not about objectivists. You know, you've read all of Ayn Rand, you've got all the facts, you've got everything. We both have those. We disagree on them. I'm quite happy for me and you to say we agree to disagree. And the fact is that the objectivist movement is not big enough to change the election. So my position on Trump doesn't matter existentially for anything, right? So my focus is on getting new people into the movement and on taking people who haven't read everything, who don't consider themselves yet objectivists or are relatively young at it, and try to get them to be deeper understanders of the philosophy. But even there, I don't take them all the way because I'm not a philosopher. So my orientation is towards them. I mean, I was thinking you were going to ask, why not debate a conservative Trump supporter? And I would love to. I mean, I'd do it tomorrow, and conservatives are the ones who resist debating me. They don't want to debate me. But I would love to debate a kind of right-wing, because my whole purpose in life is to differentiate objectivism from everybody else. So I will debate, hard to believe it, I even debated an anarchist once, right? I'll debate libertarians, some libertarians. I'll debate leftists. I'll debate conservatives. I'll debate people across the spectrum. Unless they're completely nuts, I'll debate them. The one group of people I'm not interested really in debating, I don't find it that stimulating, and I don't see the purpose in it, is objectivists. Because if we agree on almost everything and our disagreements on Trump, who cares? I don't care.
So here we are with the, again, low-hanging fruit, a Trump supporter. I'm sure you would absolutely stomp all over a Trump supporter. The point I made earlier about great drama being, you know, the good guy versus the good guy, and there's general confusion over what really is, which way do you go with that? I think, especially a show like this, is everybody's an objectivist pretty much listening to this show right now. I can imagine everybody.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot of people who are new to objectivism are listening to the show.
Right, but have a serious interest in objectivism, and for the most part, you're not going to find much disagreement. So we're all going to agree, and if we, so then what are we left with? Just
I don't know, 2,000 people, 2,000 to 5,000 people listen to every one of these shows. They might find something interesting in it.
But wouldn't there? But I guess it's maybe it's just me personally.
I know it is
wondering because there are objectivists out there who are, I don't know, you'd say pro-Trump, but would certainly never vote for Biden over Trump. And an issue like that's everything else we're going to agree on. We're going to agree on metaphysics. We're going to agree on epistemology. But when it gets to politics, which is really so important, and it is, you can't turn on the news without it. How is that not, number one, topical, and then number two, raise some very interesting questions in people's minds? I think people could learn a lot about, like Alex talking about energy policy in relation to any Democrat being elected.
But Alex wouldn't debate me on Trump. I would bet anything. I would bet all my wealth, which is less than yours, but I'd still bet it, that Alex wouldn't debate me and take the pro-Trump position. And this is the thing.
Well, maybe it's energy. Maybe you're just discussing energy policy.
But we'll agree on that. Well, Trump's energy policy is much better than Biden's. I mean, there's no question. Where's the disagreement, right? That's not that is not the issue. On issue by issue, I mean, there's some issues that where objectivists or people who call themselves objectivists disagree. The issue of trade, maybe there's some issue people who disagree. Certainly on the issue of immigration, there's a lot of disagreement. And I debated Leonard Peikoff on immigration. There's other issues in which objectivists disagree, but they're not that many. The evaluation of Trump, the evaluation of the presidency of the United States, I don't think it warrants a debate. I mean, my view is, I've said everything I've got to say about this. I've said it many, many times over many, many forums, many, many formats. You're either convinced or you're not. A debate's not going to change that fact. I don't hold it against you in any kind of serious sense that you want to vote for Trump. I'll vote. You see, this is where we disagree, I think, Robbie. And this is why you're so offended by the fact that I didn't vote. I don't think it's that important, because the fact is your vote doesn't matter and my vote doesn't matter. If my vote was the absolutely deciding vote in an election, maybe I'd care. But my vote is not the deciding vote in the election. Certainly not in California, and yours in Texas, probably not.
All right, we have to take a long view.
So I don't view voting as important, and it's more important to you in terms of your own integrity that you did what you think was the right thing versus existentially out there having an impact on the world. So my view is, if we disagree about voting, fine, then each one does what they're. Now, again, if objectivism was the balancing vote, right? If I, in my statement on my show, would determine the fate of the presidency in the future, right? There were so many objectivists that we would be the swing vote. Then I agree with you. Then I would have a debate. Then the debate makes absolute sense. But
perhaps it's not a debate. Perhaps it's a discussion.
Could be a discussion.
Yeah, it could be discussion.
Many times.
but is it energy powers everything? How would I know you, for all Trump's foils and his arrogance and braggadociousness and all the things you hate him for, that I find completely irrelevant to running the country.
This is where we disagree.
Oh, there we go.
I think those are the things that are important. And I think that the particulars of energy policy, not that important. I mean, Obama, if he'd had 4 more years, we still would have electricity in our homes. It might be a little bit more expensive, but we'd still have electricity in our home. Indeed, even if Bernie Sanders was elected tomorrow, he wouldn't actually implement the Green New Deal. It wouldn't be implemented. It wouldn't pass Congress. So we'd still have electricity in 4 years. It would be worse. It would be more expensive. But it's not, any one of these elections is not like any one policy issue is going to wipe us out. We've survived Obamacare. We were told we couldn't survive Obamacare. We were all going to die. We survived it. Not, again, it's worse than it was. It's better if there hadn't been Obamacare, but we survived it. And but Trump is changing what the presidency means. He's changing what America means. And that I don't think we can survive. I think any particular policy we can survive, but fundamentally changing the balance of power and the approach to power and the approach to what America is, that is so deep and and I think has already in the 4 years has already, I cannot imagine an epidemic becoming politicized 8 years ago, 20 years ago. It's just unthinkable. And what has happened in the last 4 years, just our attitude towards something as scientifically simple and straightforward as a virus. And I blame Trump for this. I think the left is responsible as well, but primarily I blame Trump. Everything in America today is politicized. Everything, whether the sun rises in the West is a political question. It rises in the East. There you go. That is this part of the great damage that he has done to the psyche of America. And maybe we were heading there anyway, and it didn't matter who president was, but he is the guy who's kind of pushed us over the edge.
And so this Biden, this guy that can't put sentences together, what's he going to do to the presidency?
He's going to be a nothing, and he's going to do very little, and he's going to surround himself with, semi-competent people, just like any other president has, and things are going to run okay, and hopefully there'll be enough Republicans in the Senate to block most of what he wants to do that's really horrific and bad, and things will deteriorate a little bit on the margins, and we will continue to fight so that in 4, 8, 12, 16, 20 years, we still have a country. But I don't know what happens if Trump and that mentality, I think, for example, Trump has destroyed the Republican Party. What that means is there's no opposition party anymore. There's nobody to oppose the left when it wants to do certain things. That the whole opposition is gone. And that is Trump. Now, we will pay for that in 4, 8, 12, 16, 20 years. And if Hillary had won, there'd be a robust Republican pro-free market opposition. This what do they call it? Conservative nationalism and this new right and all the different variations of new right. The one group in the Republican Party that has been eviscerated by Trump, eliminated, doesn't exist, is the pro-free market group within the Republican Party. It's gone. And the Republicans will say that. There is nobody in the Republican Party today in any position of power or prominence who is pro-free market. And to devastate the Republican Party in that sense, in that way, is going to have consequences that are far worse than having 4 years of Hillary or 4 years of Biden.
You don't think the lockdown under a Hillary or a Biden presidency would be a whole lot worse?
No, I think it would have been less worse.
I'm in Texas. All my gyms are open, thriving. Things are going extraordinarily well here in Texas.
No, it's great. But I don't think that has anything to do. I don't think the lockdowns would have happened the way they happened if not for the fact that Trump was president. The fact that in the first 45 days, Trump, in his blind, evasive arrogance, ignored the threat completely. I think somebody, even like Hillary or Biden, would have been much more respectful of the experts who were not advocating shutdowns. There is no document in the government that says that the way you deal with a pandemic is shutdown. The way you deal with a pandemic is test, track, isolate. And the fact that from middle of January, until the middle of March, we did almost no testing, certainly no tracking, very little isolation, made the situation such that New York had no option but to shut down. And then everybody copied them because there was no leadership. There was nothing counting. And indeed, I remember, I mean, people can forget this, but I don't, that when de Blasio didn't want to shut down New York, it was Trump harassing him to shut down New York. So Trump has taken a position completely contradictory from week to week. He criticized the Georgia guy for opening up too soon. right? What was that about? And I'm not making this up. I heard Trump say it. I wasn't reading it in the New York Times. So Trump has been all over the place. The extent of his poor leadership here is so devastating. But the key was that early on, he didn't listen to the scientists, because that's who Trump is. He doesn't listen to people who know what they're talking about. I don't think that would have happened under any other president that I can think of.
I think we need to consider that we have a culture that was ready for lockdowns. I think that's more scary than who's in office.
I think that's also true, but I don't think the lockdowns were inevitable. I really don't. And I think they could have been prevented. Maybe New York needs to be locked down. I'm not even convinced of that. If they had done what was basically needed to be do what lots of other countries, a few countries did. So it looks like there's incompetence across the board. But the countries that did it well did it well. And look, the lockdowns are not a political issue in England, where the conservatives dominate politics. They still did a lockdown. Germany did a lockdown. France did a lockdown. Everybody did a lockdown, left or right. The only countries that didn't do a lockdown were the countries that paid attention to the scientists, that paid attention to how you deal with pandemics, which are South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and Hong Kong. That's it. Everybody else screwed it up. Even Sweden, which didn't do a lockdown but didn't do testing, has screwed it up. So it's and everybody looks to America for leadership. This is the thing, that when you screw up as president of the United States, you're screwing up more than just the United States. You screw up the world. So, I don't know. I'm not convincing, obviously, to some people, to you, Robbie. And
I'd be one of them.
I know to many others.
Well, the testing and tracing in a country of 330 million is a little bit different.
Not hard to do at all.
Not
Before
hard.
the outbreak was in Seattle, they could have done it easily then in Northern California, then as soon as it came out in New York, they could have done it in New York. It's not that hard to do. It's not an issue of size. Korea has a smaller population, but also smaller resources, less resources than we do. We're the richest country in the world that we can't, and the CDC theoretically had the plan. The fact that the whole Trump mentality is what causes, if you remember, I mean, again, early on, the World Health Organization offered the United States one of their tests, a test that had been proven it worked in South Korea and Taiwan and these other places. And the Trump administration said, no, we need an American-made test. And the CDC made an American-made test, which allowed it up to be completely faulty. And that took us back at least 4 weeks. It's the whole mentality of Trump that's anti-science, anti-business, authoritarian, top-down, that made this. I mean, other countries that should be more authoritarian than us got the business community involved in testing earlier than we do, got tests out there, got a variety of different tests, but didn't turn down a perfectly good test because it came from a foreign country. Who cares where it comes from, as long as it works? So, no, there is a whole mentality that the Trump administration has that's inculcated into government, that is absorbed into the bureaucracy, that the coronavirus brought out the complete and utter incompetence. And it happened. I see it in foreign policy and the way they do foreign policy. Even the better people within the State Department are pathetic because they can't do their job because the way the Trump administration approaches these issues. You see it in every field. Now, yes, he has the right approach, basically because he leaves it alone in energy and a few other places. But all this other stuff is far more damaging in a long run perspective. And it's, again, what he's done to the Republican Party, we will not recover from for many, 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 many years, because for many, many years, we will not have a proper opposition to the Democrats and they'll steamroll over us. And his opposition to the Democrats is what? It's not ideological. It's not about markets. It's about, it's about name calling and
Sleepy Joe. It's about Sleepy Joe.
Nationalism and statism. So, he doesn't disagree with them on anything fundamental. So no, I really think he has made this country much worse off in ways. Now, it's true in 4 years when things suck and there's been a Democratic president, I will be saying, see, this is what happened because of what Trump did. The Republicans couldn't stand up to this guy. And you'll say, and others will say, No, it's because we elected Biden. If only Trump were president, things would be much better.
No.
We only have a parallel universe to prove it.
Yeah, well, I certainly believe Trump is in for another 4 years, which gives you another 4 years of grief.
You go.
I'd hate to
There's
see.
no point in debate. We'll have another 4 years of my grief. Look, the fun part is that no matter who gets elected, I'm going to have 4 years of grief. It's not like I'm going to celebrate that Biden gets elected. I'm going to be miserable when Biden gets elected. And then I'm going to start riling against Biden. And that'll be 4 years of me going after everything Biden does. My job never ends in terms of being anti whoever's in the White House. I mean, I did this when Bush was in the White House. And I don't know if you remember this, but I voted for John Kerry in 2004. And I'm proud of that vote and desperately wish that John Kerry had won in 2004. But it didn't work out that way. So the financial crisis got blamed on the Republicans. It got blamed on the capitalism, got blamed on, good stuff. And the Democrats won and we got Obama. And Obama's 8 disastrous, horrible years led us to Trump. And it all could have been different if only John Kerry had won in 2004.
Well, I guess you were wrong then, and I definitely believe you're wrong now.
Yes.
And let's do one of those food. I know you're a big foodie, so let's have while we've got so many witnesses. Let's have a meal of our choice in the city of our choice in the United States on the result of the election.
I don't know who's going to win. I'm not saying Biden's going to win. I do think this. I think that the Republicans will lose the House. Yeah, and well, they already lost the House. So
they've already lost the House.
They won't gain the House, even if Trump wins. I think they won't gain the House. And I think there's a significantly better than 50% chance that they lose the Senate.
So that is a bet, or that's not a bet?
No, I don't have an opinion on who's going to win the election. I don't know. I wish I knew. I wish I had a view. And maybe in a month I'll have a view. And put it this way: as soon as I have a clear view on who's going to win the election, I'll take you up on the bet if I disagree with you.
All right. I look forward to it. And again, thanks. Happy birthday. I hate to bring you all this anxiety the day after your birthday, but happy birthday.
It's always fun.
And love to Revital too.
Thank you. And thank Vonda for all the support, all the love she is showing on the super chat. I assume that's her, not you. So.
No, that is her. Yeah, that is her. And she's spelled. I go, honey, why are you spelling your last name wrong?
I know.
She doesn't want everyone to think that's her. So she thinks by changing the R to a T that somehow there's no connection between the two of us. But no, she's a super fan, and she's I love the stuff she's doing as well.
Good.
All right.
Well, thanks everybody. We'll call this a night, and I've got super chat questions. I apologize I didn't get to them, but I'll pick them up in the next show and I'll answer all of them. So look forward to that. What day is it today? Sunday. Next show is probably tomorrow night, probably tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern time. See you guys. Bye, everybody. Have a great
month.
Memorial Day weekend. Maybe we'll talk about Memorial Day tomorrow.
Thank you, Yaron.
What's that?
Thank
Jennifer?
you. Thank you, Yaron.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Great show.
Good to see you guys.
Bye.